Got everybody in here now. I think we're good to officially get started. So everybody tuning in, thank you so much for watching, and welcome to another episode of the Second Scout Podcast. I'm your host, Potato RTS, and with me, as always, is DrDabston. And I have been giddy all day because with us tonight is someone who is not only a fantastic caster, but someone who is excellent in the observer role, which I feel goes a little underappreciated. It's Lidakor. How you doing, man?
Hello there. Thank you for the invite. I'm doing great. Well, I'm also hyped to join you guys here. So I'm looking forward to this entire show.
Yeah. Right off the top, I have to start with this. So a few weeks ago, you and Drongo had a really just fascinating conversation. So I have to ask, have you been able to get yourself a plate of chicken and waffles?
No, and that's probably going to remain the same way for the next 100 years or so. So,
Hey.
maybe like maybe if we make it to Red Bull Volo in Heidelberg, maybe he's gonna buy me one, something like that. But like
I don't
he's
know if
gonna
that's
have
a
to
thing
nudge
in
me.
Germany.
I was like, I can understand why.
I think it's so funny because it's like just like a typical thing you'll see on the menu at most places here in Tennessee and in the U.S. A lot of times they'll just have that on the menu. It's a staple.
Yeah, I'm in South Carolina, so I'm in chicken and waffles country as well. So, Ludacor, you got to join us.
Well, I'm more traditional when it comes to my dining habits.
Oh,
I gotcha. So Dabston, how you doing? Think you're planning a tournament coming up this weekend. So tell us a little bit more about that.
yeah, I am. So Chewbacca always hosts the low elo Legends tournaments, and some weekends I'll jump on and cast a couple of games, help him out, kind of get more of the coverage for all the players on there. It's a real interesting experience for the players as well as casting it. Kind of learn some tips, tricks, everything there. But during last week, he mentioned he's not going to be able to play this week. I had a couple people in chat say, "Hey, you should just host one. I'll throw in some money for the prize pool. Let's make it happen." And so, looked into a little bit of that, got with Chewbacca, kind of got the scheduling of start.gg and everything there done. So I have announced it. It is called the BS Brawl, Bronze Silver Brawl. And it is going to be this Saturday, 3 p.m. So far has a $150 prize pool. Donations welcome, but even still, I think for a bronze and silver tournament, that is a quite high prize pool and should have some fun turnout there.
Yeah, really exciting. Yeah, Chewbacca does such a good job with those every weekend, and props to you as well for helping out with that. Just giving back to the community and giving players of all skill levels something fun to look forward to each week. So, sure, there's a lot of people looking forward to this weekend for that.
Yep.
But anyway, we got a few news items this week. So we got another smaller server side patch, and no balance changes, a couple quality of life fixes, and a bug fix. So it looks like we finally got the villager increased damage bug when you right click the sheep and attack move. That's been present for quite a long time. So they finally did address it. Lidakor, I'm kind of curious, how did Golden League approach this one? Because I never saw an official rule, but was there like a gentleman's agreement between players to not do it, or what was the stance there?
This one was a difficult one because the problem is that you can only make a rule for things that you can do or not do intentionally. Like, for example, when we had animation canceling, you could say, hey, you can't animation cancel because I can clearly define as a player what animation cancel is, right? I can do animation cancel. I decide if I do it or not. So we can just say, hey, you can't use that. Same thing with, let's say, herbal medicine. It's very easy not to do it. The issue that we had with this one, as much as I can recall, I'm not the one calling the admin decisions on these, is that this is something that can randomly happen, and sometimes it's completely unintentional. So even if we give a rule that, hey, you can't do this, sometimes it just happens by itself. So this was the frustrating part with this bug. As far as I know, this was one of the things that we very much disliked. And I'm not sure if there was a gentleman's agreement behind the scenes not to abuse this one, but I would think there was at least some sort of indication towards the players that this is not something that should be exploited, so to say. But this is one of those things that could just happen completely randomly. Sometimes you don't even have control over it, as far as I know. So it wasn't completely possible to just enforce a rule that says, hey, if you do this, then you're going to get punished, because sometimes it happens just randomly or sometimes out of the player's control.
Yeah, and for those out there who don't know what the bug was, there was basically your villager would get buffed up to 12 damage when you're attacking a sheep or sometimes other wolves or hunting out there on the map, and then the villagers doing 12 damage, you'd see them come into a horseman or any type of raid, and they would absolutely wipe it out because the villagers would do so much damage. So that's the bug we're talking about here, and that's where that hopefully we won't end up seeing anymore.
I will admit, I have used it to kick scouts off my gold mine. So
Yeah, that
I
was the
can no longer do
problematic
that.
part.
Yeah. And so a lot of times I did see a lot of talk in the EGC Discord about it from in between players, as well as Pessy and some of the others, I believe, talking about it. And I believe they came to a gentleman's agreement that not to do it. It's pretty clear if someone's exploiting it on purpose or when someone does it by accident. And so that's where I believe there was a lot of talk about it, like, what if I accidentally do it going for the boar when I'm defending from the boar, things like that. And that's where, for the most part, it was like, hey, we're just going to chill out with this.
Yeah, these are the scenarios where all I can say as a caster is that I'm glad that I'm not the admin for that situation. It's like, okay, I am happy that someone else has to handle all the problems of someone accidentally having that and then just killing 3 scouts or 5 knights with the villagers, and then chat is going to freak out, Discord, Reddit is going to freak out. I'm happy that I'm not the one that has to make a decision on that.
Right. I got some other general fixes. Fix a bug where the units would ignore the commands when using shift. So that I can't pinpoint specifically when this happens, but I mean, I've definitely noticed, when I shift click, it just doesn't work. So,
I know DeMuslim was very outspoken about both of these bugs. There were clear clips on his stream where it happened and where, multiple. Actually, I remember Wham having his, I think it was like 12 to 15 vills not building a mine on one of his matches in Golden League because of it. And so there's certain times when it has been a big effect, but it's also one where you couldn't control when it happened. It kind of randomly would happen. So how do you kind of deal with it without being on point, constantly noticing it? Just like the sheep wolf one, at least we kind of knew what happened there, or not sheep wolf, sheep deer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the queuing up as many structures as you can afford is another one, because I've noticed my farm's not building when I'm spam clicking farms. So, that'll clean that up a little bit, make that farm transition a little bit easier. Then we're getting another public update preview. So this kind of indicates that we're getting a big change in the future. So I know they've kind of already outlined what they want to do for season 2. So like the full hotkey remapping, they're going to give you more options for that, and player colors, hopefully, finally. Why it's taken this long, I don't know. But yeah, and then something else I kind of found was interesting was they're looking at the ranked points, how that pays out. Because I think on average, you lose more points for a loss than you gain for a win. And somebody a couple weeks ago posted like a video of just the ranking distribution over time. And it just showed the whole distribution of players like getting slowly pushed towards bronze. And so hopefully next season that isn't happening.
I believe there was also something inside of it to where if you played someone 600 elo lower than you, it would give you points for a full win, like someone was like your same elo. And so I believe that kind of happened for more players who grinded up the ladder quite fast, and Beastie Cutie getting to play people that are 600 elo below him and just getting max points rather than +1, which it should be. So that was kind of a big effect, I believe, as well.
Yeah, so hopefully those numbers become a little more sensible. And then let's see what else I have. We haven't looked at win rates in a while, so I've got the win rates pulled up from AOE4 World, Platinum and above. So this is the patch since the Mangonel buff and Mongol nerf and the other small changes we talked about last week. Really tight distribution. So once again, nice job by Relic. And I'm surprised by a couple things. First surprise is Abbasid is still the lowest win rate, and I would have thought that the Mangonel buff would have helped them more than it has.
Yeah, that surprises me. My biggest shock is, I mean, if you see Reddit, you see anyone talk, especially in the middle, higher elos, low elos, all over the place. It's always English, English, English complaints, and seeing them at the one of the bottom win rates again, it kind of just shows, hey, Mangonels has not
Well,
allowed English to be that upper echelon civ anymore.
yeah. Well, hold on. Watch this.
Oh
If I
gosh.
go to all leagues, oh, they're up to 50, up
All
above
right, all
50%.
right. All right. It's still
But
it's not like it's anything crazy like the old days of Mongols and Delhi where we
well,
saw 60% win rates.
I'm actually surprised the other direction because N4C, if you remember, English was kind of designated as a throwaway civ. Like that's how bad they were. And since the Mangonels have been rebuffed, the only changes English have really had since N4C was the Abbey of Kings buff, which isn't being utilized, the Dark Age Men at Arms armor, which isn't being utilized, and then the 50 extra wood. And so I'm
That goes a long way.
surprised. It does go a long way, but I'm surprised that they're still close to that 50% mark because we saw them like in the low 40s or like a couple patches ago.
The thing with these, like the English, is that there was a massive emergence in new build orders, though. So, like,
Yeah.
if you compare the current builds to N4C with the English, they didn't have those farm heavy builds. Those started to get implemented like partly by the end of N4C, if I recall correctly. I think Mista was one of the first players to experiment with a farm heavy approach throughout N4C, but the wider audience started to use that after N4C. So
Mhm.
that probably contributes in some ways to that win rate change because back before then, English was played in one very specific way, and now you're seeing a lot more deviation in build
Mhm.
orders. Sometimes you see 2000 or feudal ages as well from the English. So I feel like the extra variety of options available for the English also is influencing these win rates quite a bit for English here.
Yeah, that extra wood does help facilitate that early farm strategy as well. So um, I know like Mista was trying it even before that change hit, but
Yeah,
it
he actually was doing 2TC, not doing the fast castle. He was going farms into 2TCs and having that pay off and getting a third TC. So like a super, super greedy build because just how I think one of our soon to be subjects is defensive structures are so strong if you know how to utilize them correctly. And so Mista, obviously being a high elo player, knows how to utilize that correctly. And English having a extra buffed up defense allowed him to even utilize it even better.
HRE with the buff, it has helped them a little bit. I've noticed a difference playing them. So and they're not trash tier anymore, which I don't think they ever were, but they're playable. And Mongols, the EM network nerf hasn't killed them, so they're still very strong. But overall, with 8 civs that are so different, with this, I think this win rate grouping is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's also hard to balance when people don't think about the bigger picture of team games, of the different maps. Like you think about if you give Holy Roman another buff, playing them on Hill and Dale is just going to be too easy. So it's kind of things like that to where, Hill and Dale, I'm sure if you pulled up Holy Roman's win rate, they would be up at the top, but on Dry Arabia, maybe not as much. And so that's really where it shows the balance has been great because it's covering all aspects right now.
Yeah, and so alluding to defensive structures that you mentioned earlier, Snoopa today on Reddit posted that on an alt account, he has hit Diamond 1, making only villagers in defensive structures, which makes me feel really bad about myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's planning on posting all those games on YouTube. He's posted the first one, a Drongo casted one. Also, there's one on his channel, and it's very entertaining. So anybody interested in checking that out, definitely find Snoop on YouTube. But man, me trying as hard as I can like barely stick in plat, and he's diamond with only villagers. Oh man. But anyway, with all that being said, we're going to move on to Golden League, which is why we brought you on, Lidakor. We got to talk about Golden League. But first off, kind of want to give people an opportunity to get to know you better. I've seen a lot of posts on Reddit that kind of say Age of Empires 4 is their first esport they've really followed, so they might not know you from your Age of Empires 2 days. So what got you into Age of Empires to begin with, and then what sort of prompted you to get into casting?
Oh, that's a cool story. So that goes back to something like 2018. Um, at the time, I was just, regular Twitch viewer, and on Twitch there is that sidebar that sometimes gives you some recommendations, usually just trash recommendations. But there was a channel that popped up which was called Escape AOE at that time, which was essentially the DEGC TV of AOE2 back in those days. And it had AOE2 tournaments running. At that time, it was like 400-500 people. So it wasn't big, but I was a big fan of AOE2 back when I was a kid. It was one of the first games I played. I also played AOE1. I also played AOE3, actually. So, people think I'm weird because I said, hey, I like and enjoy AOE2 and 3 at the same time. Not a lot of people are there in the universe like that. But yeah, that got me into that. And it got me really hyped up. I started enjoying watching those games. And I quickly realized that, hey, this is really enjoyable because compared to some other esports, like let's say Counter-Strike, it's a completely different experience. You don't have, a round of 2 minutes where there's intense action, there's a bit of a downtime, and then you do the same thing again like 30 times. Instead, you sometimes have 2-hour-long grindy games, a lot of action all over the place, and it was a different experience, right? And started following the game, and ultimately I became a regular viewer. And back in 2019, like that was January or so, I started streaming myself. That was actually in Hungarian, and I just wanted to sort of be variety streamer, started for fun, stuff like that. I didn't have big aspirations by any means, but that was essentially the period where a lot of people started streaming by themselves on Twitch, like all across the world. And I wanted to be, hey, variety streamer, sure thing. I just stream my gameplay to friends, and new people will join in. Well, that's where I had to realize that I can't focus on communicating and gaming at the same time. Like, I'm either a terrible player or I don't interact with the chat at all. And I had to realize that in order to be a good variety streamer, either you have to be like really good at games and then just get new audience by being good at games, or you have to be very entertaining, enjoyable. And I was sort of neither. So I quickly had to give up on this. And there was one thing I realized. I realized that I can't be entertaining and good at a game at the same time. So how about not having me play at all? How about just me watching game? That's where the two things connected. I was watching Escape, the AOE2 tournaments, and I realized that, hey, I can't play the game and also interact with the chat, be entertaining at the same time. But what if I don't have to play? Instead, just watch a game and just talk about it. And that's how I started it. The community was very welcoming. It was a great scene at that time. It is still a great scene. And at that time, it wasn't as big as it was like last year or this year or so. It's not like we were talking about tens of thousands of people watching sometimes. In fact, we had way less streamers. Many of the pro players did not stream at that time. So like we had time frames where the largest streamer had like 10 viewers, which also was a little appealing for me as an aspiring streamer. You didn't feel like you are just lost in the crowd of streamers. There were time frames throughout the day where you could just start streaming, and if you had like 7 viewers, you were considered one of the more viewed streamers in that time frame. So that helped a lot. I was with AOE2 for quite a while. Did cast and host some tournaments as well. Got some Microsoft funding as well. That was a long journey to get there for some events that I created. And ultimately, one of the things that I had to consider as AOE4 was coming out, like I was involved in AOE4, the pre-release version testing for like a year or so, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I knew that it's going to be a big dilemma what to do when AOE4 comes out. And when the game came out, I realized that I simply don't have time for both. Ideally, in an ideal world, I would be doing both because I still enjoy both games. But I realized that I simply don't have time to do both games at an accurate level. And I wanted to be good at one. So I had to basically make a decision. To put this into context, when you're casting AOE2, you call the English civilization the Britons. When you cast AOE4, you call it the English. And when you go back and forth between games, you're going to confuse the two as you speak. It's inevitable. or you're going to confuse Franks with French. And those are small mistake points that people will start complaining about. It will look a little less professional. So I wanted to avoid this. I was aware of my limitations, and I said, okay, I want to be good at one. And AOE4 allows you to have a clean sheet. Everybody started at the same exact point when AOE4 came out. Unlike AOE2, where we already had casters that have been doing that for decades even. So, me, a newcomer for 1 or 2 years of streaming experience, casting experience, I was a rookie, and I will probably always be a rookie compared to the guys that have been doing that for 15, 20 years even, right? When AOE4, it was a brand new game. Everybody comes in with a clean sheet, so I had the chance to be one of the more experienced ones, so to say, and not feel like I'm someone that just joined the party a little too late. Now, obviously, there are a lot of reasons why I switched to AOE4. I don't really want to go deep into that because I could probably talk about that for like an hour. Long story short, it's not the only reason why I switched, and I don't want to make it seem like, hey, I just switched because I wanted to be popular or the big guy. It's a lot more complex than that. Ended up starting to cast AOE4. And at the time AOE4 was released, we basically had two casters that were known to be heavily committing time to AOE4. That was Drongo and myself. So that's how we got paired for EGC Genesis, which was the first AOE4 tourney out there, hosted by EGC. And we got paired there. We had a pretty good run, and we slowly started to build up chemistry. And that's essentially the story. So from that point on, I was involved more and more with EGC. Now with Golden League, observing came in for me during Golden League because we had to solve some issues from the producing side to make sure that it's the long story is that you have the spectator overlay, which is a little wacky, and it's not something that really can be handed out right now. So we sort of had to limit the amount of people that get access to that. We couldn't just throw it at like 15 different casters who would be involved in the show. So instead, what was decided upon is that we have a limited amount of spectators that will have access to that will be taught how to use it. And they're going to be handling, observing, providing a feed to other casters. I was one of these people because I was available for most of the time. And Vodka is the other one who is doing it. That is because, as weird as it sounds like from an outside perspective, it might not seem difficult that you just handle the camera and you push it around. I can tell you it's one of the most mentally depleting parts of casting.
Yeah. I can't see shit on the minimap, so I fully understand how hard it is.
It's insanely depleting mentally. Like, I had to realize this. I was handling the camera for myself for years, and I had to realize that one of the things that made my casting worse than it should have been in some cases is that I just had to pay attention to handling camera, because not only are you supposed to make sure that you're not missing the action, you're not missing any key parts, you also, if you want to be really cool, you need to make sure that you're not shaking the camera, you're not randomly clicking away. You are controlling the camera in a very smooth and just well-viewable manner. And that is depleting and distracting. So it helps a lot for casters that there's an external observer who is doing that for them, and all they have to do is just do the speaking. So in many ways, part of the reason why we decided to have observers is this, and part of the reason why I am not doing the observing when I'm casting is this, because it would be very difficult to handle the camera and speak at the same time. Not impossible, but it's definitely easier for the caster to have a clean feed with an observer given to him. And we wanted to make sure that it's as convenient for the casters as possible.
Makes sense.
Now, for those that don't know, so the overlay, the spectator overlay, that's my understanding of it is it's basically like a map hack, right? And so you don't want that just getting out there.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've seen lots of comments like, why can't everyone have this? And that's pretty much the reason why.
Yes, it's, well, you can imagine this yourself. I mean, I'm probably not leaking anything with this, but in order for you to get the data that you're seeing on a screen, you need to get that data from somewhere. And guess what? That comes from the game, which means that you're directly accessing game data. And well, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that if you can directly access game data, it's not really difficult to modify that game data with some tinkering around. So yes, it's essentially a hack. Then that's part of the reason why it's not publicly released by any means. As far as I know, there are efforts to do something that's a little safer, but right now there are very strict restrictions on this, because if it gets out, then it's going to be very easy for the people that know what they're doing to make hacks for the game, and obviously that's something that no one wants.
Makes sense.
So, how did your kind of relationship with EGC TV start?
Oh.
Prior to Genesis, were you just casting a bunch of games on Twitch and Pesty, noticed and approached you?
No, it's actually a crazy story. It's an unbelievable coincidence. So the story was that, like, for a long time, like when I was an AOE2 caster, I was interested in AOE3. As I said, I enjoyed the game. And I wanted to try myself out at AOE3 casting. I didn't have any like long aspirations, or I didn't have any deep plans to do so much AOE3 content or anything like that. But I wanted to give it a shot. And as far as I can recall, but I might be wrong on this, back in the pre-definitive edition version of the game, so the ESOC servers, you couldn't just spectate a game. You couldn't just say, hey, there's a pro game, I want to spectate this, unlike AOE2. You had to like occupy a lobby spot, and that basically meant that you had to communicate with players. Like, I, as a random new face, I couldn't just join a lobby and say, hey, I'm here to spectate. And because of that, I never really got into AOE3 casting. And when DE came out, some things changed, and they had a new DLC, the African Kingdoms. And I was like, hey, there is that EGC event. At that time, EGC was doing AOE3 events, relatively small ones, with the African Kingdoms, and I would be interested in doing some costs for it. Obviously, like, the stakes were relatively small because the audience wasn't huge. So we're not talking about tens of thousands of people watching me as a beginner caster, right? And I was actually paired with Drongo. This was our first cast together. That's where we got to know each other, actually. And it went fairly well. Like, the feedback generally was that for a person that has not touched AOE3 for like 5 years, and that DLC was out for like 2 days, so it's not like I had a ton of time to learn, it was a really good cast. And by the way, Drongo also had an appearance in AOE2, because that was like last August. At the time, Drongo was still very small because AOE4 didn't really kick off, so he didn't have, like, most of his content was still AOE3. So it's like he had 5,000 to 7,000 YouTube subscribers or something like that at the time when we talked about this. But I got to know him through AOE3 and said, hey, I kind of like this guy. We got good chemistry. He's energetic. At the time, I was purely analytical when it comes to casting. So I was like, I was the guy that could never get hyped. I was the guy that was like, okay, no matter how hyped the moment, I'm always objective and calm. And we were a good pairing with a hype guy like Drongo. He was even more hype at that time, I believe. It was like, he was going crazy,
wow.
man. And I actually invited him back while I was hosting an AOE2 tourney. So we had an AOE2 cast together as well. But that's how we got to know each other. But the way that I got involved in EGC was essentially an accident. I was looking for opportunities to try myself out as an AOE3 caster, and they happened to have an event. And then they were pretty satisfied. So that's how we essentially built that connection. And then we also had that pre-existing chemistry, so to say, with Drongo. And it was relatively well known that we're both going to pursue AOE4 quite a bit. So it was a natural combination to invite for the first one. And because we went on and had a pretty good run in EGC Genesis, Pesty was satisfied with us. Obviously, it made sense to retain both of us.
Gotcha. So
cool.
When you first jumped in on that cast, was that the first time you had casted with a co-caster? And if so, no, it wasn't. So how did you kind of go about learning to go from going, hey, I'm just solo, I'm using my mouse, moving around the map myself, to learning to go with a co-caster more?
Like, by the time I got to cast with Drongo, I had like multiple runs with other casters. So back in AOE2, it wasn't very common because I was mostly solo casting for my content. But I was invited to AOE2 events before as a co-caster, so it wasn't it wasn't really a problem, obviously. The thing that I noticed is that at the time, Drongo was also just doing full solo casting. I think it might have been his first time doing something with a co-caster. So one of the things that we had to clean up at the beginning, and I still remember these days, is that Drongo, he had a high amount of energy and he was mostly doing solo casting, so it was a little difficult to get any kind of window for me to speak. As well, he was a little, oppressive, so to say, in that regard. And I don't blame him for it. Like, we talked about that after we cast together, and he said, "Yeah, it's my first time casting with a co-caster, and we had to get used to that." And that improved considerably over the course of the last couple of months. I think that was the most important part of us building chemistry. So for me, it wasn't really a big hurdle because I did co-cast before, and I'm usually, as I said, the more analytical type of caster. So I am the guy that's always letting the others have their room that they want, and I just adapt. At the beginning, Drongo had like a very energetic, very dominant casting style, so I was given little room. That wasn't really a problem for that AOE3 cast, by the way, because he was familiar with the game, or a lot more familiar than I was. For AOE4, we had to balance it out, but by Genesis, we had that. And I think our casts before AOE4 helped a lot for us to establish that chemistry, because we sort of learned each other's tendencies when one wants to speak. And it's difficult to learn. The most difficult thing to learn when you are building chemistry with another caster is getting a feel of when the other wants to start to speak. Because sometimes I finish my sentence and 5 seconds later or 3 seconds later, something pops into my mind I actually want to say, and I need to know if the other caster is planning to start speaking at that very moment. Because if we both start speaking at the same time, it feels a little clumsy and whatnot. So it was an interesting journey, but I think communication was really important. So one of the best things that we did, and we still do it to this day, is communicate. How did you feel about this cast? Essentially, after every single cast, we speak for like 15 minutes and say, okay, how did you feel? Did this go well? What are the issues that we need to fix? And this helps us build chemistry, and this makes sure that we both enjoy our casts and we deliver our best when we're working together.
Gotcha. So
Very
you
cool.
just went on what you do after the cast. What about before? Is there any preparation that you do? Any sort of routine that you have? I know some football player or sports players have their morning routine. Do you have anything like that for some big days, big broadcasts?
Yes, it's actually something I've picked up like 3 months ago or so. I started to go a lot more hardcore on prep when it comes to the way I speak, mostly because that was one of my biggest weaknesses. I'm not a native speaker, and I'm trying to make up for that deficit. I have about a 2-hour prep before every broadcast.
Wow.
That's pretty sick. That partly includes like at least 15 minutes of me setting up the green screen behind me, the lights and whatnot. So, truth being told, some of that is not actual prep; it's just me plugging things in. But yes, I have about an hour-long voice warm-up that includes a bunch of stuff I learned from the internet. So, singing exercises, voice warm-ups, tongue twisters. There is like a list of tongue twisters, like 100 of them. And I go through that list every single time before a broadcast. And I only move to the next tongue twister once I've nailed one, like 2 or 3 times in a row. So it's like, I once showed them to Killer Pitch, and he was like, holy smokes, man, that's a lot of them. It's like, yes. And then usually, like, we hop into a call 15 to 20 minutes before a broadcast with the other casters. That's where we talk about the smaller things. We simply don't need much more. Like, we have enough built-up chemistry with Drongo to just spend 10 minutes or so discussing what we need to do, because we know each other's tendencies. We don't need to like talk through all the important details, like, okay, how do we introduce games? We all know, like, you may have noticed in HEC casts that the way we introduce games is that Drongo starts off with one player and then I introduce the other one. It's something we built up over time.
Unless Viper's playing, right?
Yes, but in that case, I know that Drongo wants to introduce Viper, so
Drongo's
I introduce
introducing
the other
Viper.
one. Yeah, that's something that we either discuss prior to the broadcast or we just learn from each other's tendencies. We mostly discuss stuff like, okay, do you want to introduce the day? Do you want to, sit back a little bit more, talk about statistics and whatnot? These are things like if I were to cast with someone that I didn't really have a broadcast with before, I would probably spend like 30 minutes to an hour talking stuff like, okay, do you want to do play by play? How much you want to go on statistics? How deep you want to go on the theory of the game? Because that's something that's going to help you to polish a broadcast, and it's going to be easier for you, for both of you, if you know what to expect the other to do. Like if you just hop into a broadcast with someone that you didn't cast with before, you're going to have some hiccups because you don't know their tendencies, and there are going to be some awkward moments. Sometimes it's not terrible. I have done casts before with people that I've never cast with before, but if you want it to be really smooth, it helps a lot that you talk through at least the most important things prior to the broadcast.
So you've been pretty open with the fact that you're not a top player yourself by any means. So how are you? How do you keep up with the meta? Do you do any prep throughout the week? Just because we've seen so many different meta changes throughout Golden League, where we've had a bunch of balance patches, and sometimes it takes a week after the patch comes out for the new strategies to really emerge. So how do you keep on top of all that?
Ooh, so yes, I am by any means no pro player, not even a good one. I think I'm somewhere like low golds or something.
That's bigger than the majority.
Yeah. If you're silver 1, you are better than 50% of the players. Like that's how skewed the ranking distribution is.
But I think if you look at any other esports, the thing is that the casters are very rarely elite players. Like sometimes you have elite players jumping into cast, but most of the casters are like full-time casters, so to say. They're not elite players. Because my job is not to play the game at an elite level. If I did that, I would be playing, not casting, right? But my job is to translate information to the audience in an understandable way. Like that's essentially my job. So I don't need to be the best player. I just need to understand everything that a pro player does. And this is my mindset on this. I don't want to be the guy that is pressing the hotkeys really fast, clicking really fast, microing like a madman, because that's not going to help me casting. I, however, want to understand what pro players do, and that's how I approach this. So I'm trying to catch every single piece of information I can. Like I go into a Beastie stream. If he says something like, hey, I prefer to do this rather than that because of this, I'm going to take my notepad, take notes, because I say, hey, Beastie is an elite player. If he says this, then that's probably a top-notch assessment of the scenario. So if I say the same thing during a broadcast, I'm essentially translating a pro player's perspective to the audience when I cast. So my perspective on this is that I want to learn what the pro players do, what the pro players have going on in their heads. And I'm trying to grab every single opportunity I can to learn from them. When I co-cast with a pro player, I'm trying to learn some pieces from them. I often listen, like when I'm doing observing. For example, when Killer Pigeon and Beastie are casting, I'm doing observing for them. I also listen to the cast, and I'm also taking notes of what Beastie is saying. I'm highlighting Beastie because he often appears on the EGC channel, but that applies to other players as well, like the Muslim, Viper, you name it. I'm trying to pick up pieces as well from players people like Maito who are on the balance team. So, for example, a great example is that 2 months ago, I didn't know that the hunting cabin gives you vision into a stealth forest. That's something I picked up when Maito was co-casting with someone on EGC stream. And I was like, hey, that's a pretty cool piece of info, and I can use that in the future. So that's how I approached this. Back in my AOE2 days, I also did, at the time I was relatively small. So it was awkward and kind of unlikely for me to just, ask a player to share his POV for me for like an hour on certain things. So back in my AOE2 days, I did paid coaching. I was the one paying for the coaching by pro players. And, there were quite a lot of pro players that offered paid coaching, and I told them, look, don't teach me how to set up my hotkeys because I don't care. I care about your perspective on the game. Let's go through a couple of games. Tell me how you think about this, why that reaction was made, because I just want to think with your head. And I did this with multiple people, so I gathered a bunch of different perspectives on how the game works and how pro players think about it. And I just assemble it to one big thing in my head, and then I try to translate that towards the audience.
Nice.
That's cool. It really impressive, just the amount of work you put in to get to where you are, and I think it shows because you talk about the chemistry you and Drongo have. I think you guys are a great pairing, and we are blessed in the Age of Empires 4 community to have you guys that take this so seriously with the professionalism that you guys have.
Yeah, people do think it's quite a little bit easier than what it seems to be, and don't realize how much work really does go into even streaming, casting, anything in general. There's definitely a lot more work than on the front end. So one thing I was going to ask was, I know you mentioned, early on in AOE2, you had, you were watching, you were mainly a viewer. Who were some of the main people that were your favorites early on when you were a viewer?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I didn't have specific favorites. It's not like I was a fanboy of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Two names that pop into my head are Taro and Nikov, because that was the first game, like them playing against each other, that I've ever seen, and I remember those names from that point. It's like, for a long time, that was the only two names I knew. Taro actually had some AOE4 runs, and actually he's back to AOE4 part-time. He was playing team games with the Spanish community, as far as I know.
He was on there today.
Yep. Nikov, he's back AOE2. I actually had him as a coach for some time, and we have pretty good relations. So that was part of that. Obviously, I was very well aware of Viper. So he was a big fan favorite at that time. Also got to meet him once because we had, as I mentioned, Escape from before. They had a LAN in Manchester in 2019. That was August 2019. That was the only LAN event I've ever been to. So like that already gives you a context of how much I love the game and the community. Is like, it's not like I went to a CS:GO major, despite the fact, or a Rainbow Six major, even better. I have like, I don't know, a couple of thousand hours in Rainbow Six. I've never went to any LAN event of that as a viewer. I went to an AOE2 event. It was basically played in a hangar style setup. Budget wasn't that huge for it, but it was very well organized, and it's one of my most beloved memories in the AOE scene to this day. And it was very, very close knit. So, like, you got to meet with the players, you got to meet with the casters, and it was a great experience. Like, I got to meet with Taro. I got to meet with Doubt. I have pictures with me and Doubt, and that just represents how short I am compared to him. I never got to take a photo with Viper. I think we had, I don't remember how many players, but like less than 15, something like 12 players over there. And I think Viper is the only person I don't have a photo with, because he was like so much of a fan favorite in that time already, of course. That was like, I don't think he did a lot of photos, simply because, there would have been like 150 people wanting to take photos with him. And I think he was also partly sick during the event. So part of that could have contributed. But yeah, got to know a lot of cool people. I didn't have particular favorites, but like actually there is one more person, but AOE4 people won't know him. Zupi is probably my absolute favorite Age of Empires human out there. He's such an adorable person, and yeah, I gotta meet him as well. Great guy. Really, like, he was one of my favorite people to meet with.
Cool. Any more questions, Dabs, before we dive straight into this past weekend?
I think those were the main ones that kind of crossed my mind while we were sitting here talking. Definitely interesting to always pick the brain and see kind of what people emulated, their, whether it be casting or play style or just how they learned the game.
Cool. Oh, I actually do have one more. Do you ever just hop on to hop in the game and just kind of use the spectate function and just kind of spy on some players? And if so, who do you kind of like to watch?
Well, obviously, who I like to watch and who has their recorded games open is two
Mm.
different stories, and I've been
Yeah.
very vocal towards the devs that we need to fix that. There was like a terrible period where none of the top 50 players had their profiles open. So when I was trying to cast for YouTube, I was like, who am I supposed to cast here, man? There is not a single person with their Rex open. Sometimes I hop in. Um, um, Obviously, like right now, I am hopping into games mostly to see some very specific things and strategy decisions.
Mm.
But while I was active in YouTube, I'm actually much less active nowadays, mainly because I'm, as I said, focusing so much on making sure that I'm nailing every single EGC cost that I have. But I'm planning to go back on making more solo YouTube content. But like when I was doing those, I obviously was hunting for Rex. I had a bunch of considerations to make. How long was the game? How entertaining it was? It's like I found no point in casting a game that was over in 13 minutes with one player dominating. Right? Like that's not what you're looking for.
Mm.
I was sort of specializing in hunting for long games. So I was looking for 1v1s that are like an hour long, hour and 15, because in those cases, oftentimes you see some crazy comebacks or some very long holds, some epic late game. So I was hunting for those. Nowadays, I'm mostly looking for specific things. So let's say there is a weird build order that not a lot of people have used before. I'm going to look into that, see how that works. Um, think about how I could see that being used in a tournament and stuff like that. But yeah, those are most of the things that I'm looking for in Rex nowadays.
I love to watch Casva.
It's funny you say that. I literally have people in my chat that say Caspa's the most entertaining player to watch. Not even close. And
Casva and B, man, it's just
I am
wild.
personally, I usually end up, and it might be just because of my time zone as well, and kind of who plays games at what times. But the people I usually end up spectating without them knowing is probably Caspa, Wham, and Puppy Ball.
Fun fact, Kazva is the first pro player I've ever cast. So the story is with that is that, as I said, in AOE2, there were time frames that was like around 11 a.m. or noon in Europe time. So like that's still 5, 6 a.m. Eastern time, where there weren't really a lot of streamers on. So, it was easier for a startup streamer like myself to get some exposure. And I was already trying casting at that time. The problem was that there weren't really a lot of pro players online at that time. Like Viper, I think Viper at that time started to stream at like 2 or 3 p.m. And took all the viewers from Twitch anyway. So there was no point for me, a startup streamer, streaming from that point on. And most of the other pro players also played in that time frame, so that's like 2 p.m. onwards. And the only person that was like very high ranked in AOE2 at that time was Casva. So I actually ended up casting a lot of Casva games in AOE2 back in like early 2019, because he was the only high level player who was consistently playing in the time frame I was streaming.
That's funny.
I actually have a very, very. You mentioned looking for long games, back and forth ones. I actually have a very interesting one between Caspa and Puppy Paw, where they had over 4,000 people die in the battle. I think it was an hour and 45-minute back and forth game. That was a just crazy one.
I remember seeing the wreck, but I think like that was the time where I said, I don't think I have time for this. I was heartbroken. It's like, that's a good game. That's also a grindy one, like 105 minutes to cast. My longest single game in AOE4 that I cast was 4 hours. I actually ended up casting. There was a Reddit game that was posted, which was Mountain Pass 4v4, and
Oh
someone
my
made like
god.
1 million gold. And I ended up casting that. As like the overall casualties were in the tens of thousands.
God.
Was
All
a
right.
fun one.
Yeah,
I have
my,
go ahead, Debs.
I was just gonna say the game that I casted. It was, I'm gonna do one more before I go to bed. Cast for Puppy Paw. It'll just be a quick one. An hour and 45 minutes later, I was finally ending the cast and trying to go to bed.
Yep. I have a would you rather question. Would you rather cast a bronze level 4v4 on Black Forest or a Roost mirror on Boulder Bay?
Probably Boulder Bay. Like, you're gonna find me weird, but I love hybrid maps, and it's like one Roost mirror on Boulder Bay. I'm fine with that. Give me 10, I'm going to cry probably because it's gonna get a little repetitive. But I'm fine with one Boulder Bay game. Like, I am a big connoisseur of naval combat, hybrid maps, and stuff like that. People call me crazy for that, and I think they have a reason to. But well, it is what it is. I would much prefer to go for the Roost Mirror. Although I would probably have fun with the Bronze League Black Forest game. I would just sit back and chill.
Bronze
You'd be
League
chilling
games
for a long time.
Bronze League games are much more exciting than you expect, and a lot of times it's beating your head against the wall because you're like, please just do this, please.
Yeah. Okay, so this past weekend, obviously, we concluded the group stage of Golden League, and so it started off Saturday was a little bit rocky. You know, we were starting off with Wham to Muslim, and middle of game two, well, not the middle, towards the end, I think the writing was on the wall there for Wham, but he disconnects. Storm knocked out the power to his house. You guys kind of had to scramble around. That series is actually going to conclude tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. And no official EGC TV broadcast, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people casting that. So it'll be tomorrow at the normal time Golden League usually starts. Dabs, you're going to take off work and cast it?
I don't think I am. I have some meetings tomorrow that are a little high up on the priority list that I will not be able to pass up making actual money for streaming a little bit.
That's all right. So yeah, series is 1-1. Wham did concede that second game, which I think is the right choice. I don't think he had any chance of winning that. So yeah, they go in 1-1. The final four is already set, so neither of them can qualify, but still decent amount of prize money on the line for them. Then, since Puppy Paw was also impacted by the same storm, you guys had to scramble and get Marine Lord and Vortex. And Marine Lord goes 4-0. Vortex was unable to improve his position, so not really anything to play for. I don't know how motivated he was. So I don't know if I can take much away from this series other than Marine Lord. He looks like Marine Lord. So, Lidakor, what was your thoughts on that series?
Well, first of all, we were really happy that we could show anything that day because that was like the absolute worst case scenario, especially because that day was supposed to be really hype. So, if you remember the original schedule, the idea was that we had Wham the Muslim first, which is essentially a battle for the third place in that group. Some prestige with it, obvious that you finish third in your group rather than fourth. Quite some prize money on the line as well. And then followed by the set between Lucifron and Puppy Paw, which was obviously the highlight of the weekend. It was the set which determines who gets into the top four. Career moment for Puppy Paw. Lucifron, of course, also potentially a chance to deliver one of his best performances in AOE4 so far. And things didn't go that way, right? If you compare to the other day, the Sunday schedule was Marine Lord Vortex, as you said, Marine Lord couldn't lose his number one position. Vortex couldn't improve his fourth position. So it is what it is, right? And then Viper Beastie, important set for the positioning in the other group, but realistically, neither of them gets eliminated. So it wasn't an elimination match, so to say. So like, Saturday was the big hype day, and things didn't go that way. Obviously, we had to scramble a lot with the production. So like, it wasn't easy for us by any means. So like, obviously, as you probably have heard, I'm involved pretty heavily in the production side of things as well, alongside observing. So we had to scramble for things, and we had to figure out what to do. It's actually very lucky for us, and huge shout out for Marine Lord and Vortex to step in at the time they did. So at basically 5 minutes notice, they said, hey, we can pull our set to this day and play instead of playing tomorrow so that we have something to show. And huge credit goes to the players for that. Obviously, score is 4-0, which is, well, it is what it is, right? But we got some good games going. The individual games were fairly enjoyable, and we had something to show on a day where things could have gotten a lot worse. And some of you might be wondering, hey, why is Puppy Paw Luciferon played and Wham the Muslim isn't? When, Wham the Muslim, Wham and Puppy Paw live at the same place. So if Puppy Paw can play, why cannot Wham? So long story short, we can't really fit in 3 sets for Sunday. So that wasn't really an option, even though the Muslim set is not an entire set. It's just 3 or like 2/3 of a set, really. But basically, the idea was that Puppy Paw and Luciferon have to play their set on Sunday because their opponent on the semifinals needs to know who he is facing. So we can't just push it back to like Wednesday, Thursday, right? So that's the reason why Luciferon Puppy Paw had to be played, was pushed to the early time frame, and then Viper Beastie was played after that. As you said before, Marine Lord Vortex stakes weren't super high, so I don't really want to go deep into discussing that 4-0. It is what it is. Vortex still had a top 8 finish. He was probably hoping for more, but nothing to be ashamed of. Top 8 in a very closely contested tournament is still pretty good. Other side, Viper Beastie. Well, as I always say, if you want to be the champion, you got to be able to beat everybody. So, well, Viper gets to play Marine Lord, Beastie gets to play Puppy Paw. We'll see how that goes. I think the highlight of the weekend, obviously, and the most important set was Lucy from Puppy Paw. Very convincing win from Puppy Paw. Huge storyline on his side, obviously, because he was playing from a hotel Wi-Fi. So, for him to go into the most important set of his career from a hotel Wi-Fi with a very short notice and then win in such convincing fashion is unbelievable. And I mean, no matter what happens in the semifinals, I think he has to be happy with where he has gotten in this one. And this could actually help against Beastie because Puppy Paw can go into that semifinals saying that it doesn't matter what happens. There is no stress for Puppy Paw. He has probably exceeded expectations already, and he has to be really happy with the top 4 finish here. Obviously, a lot of the stake for next week because the winners of the semifinals are guaranteed a spot at Red Bull Volo Legacy in Heidelberg. So if Puppy Paw takes down Beast in the semifinals, he's going directly to Heidelberg.
And then even if he loses, he will play the battle for 3rd place because BC has already qualified. So that will still be another equally exciting matchup as far as the overall finals goes in my eyes. Because either way, qualifying for Wolo Low is basically the equivalent of winning this as well.
Yep, indeed. If Beastie gets into the finals, then the 2nd and the 3rd place will get the qualifying spots for Heidelberg. So the 3rd place match, which is played in the beginning of the Sunday show, is also going to have a pretty big importance. But obviously, there's a lot of spots available for Red Bull World Legacy. So even if that doesn't work out for Puppy Paw, I feel like if he continues to play on the level he did in Golden League, he's going to have zero problems qualifying.
Yeah, so let's kind of go back to that Luciferon Puppy Paw series. You said it was the highlight of the weekend, and you said earlier you were kind of more the analytical guy, but you were getting hyped during that series.
You gotta do that. I was told that you gotta scream into a microphone because you gotta translate that enjoyment. Like gotta adapt to the tendencies of broadcasting, But yes, that's one of the things I had to work the most on. I was never the screaming type of guy, and I will never have the Drongo Killer Pigeon style energy, and I don't even want to. But yes, that's one of the key things I had to improve a lot on. Sound insulation also helped me over here because I'm not gonna lie, when I moved in here, I was a little scared that if I just start screaming into my microphone, my neighbors will be angry at me. So I did 2 things. First, I did some, sound panels and whatnot. Second, I started caring less. So if they complain, I don't give a damn. I mean, my other neighbor, is sometimes playing shooter games at 3 a.m. from loudspeakers. So I no longer care about screaming on stream.
I take it no complaints then. Yeah. All right. So yeah, Puppy Paw caps it off with just a really well executed slow push as the Mongols against Luciferon's English. I feel like it's such a big moment for him. It would be so easy to throw there, But kept his composure and just perfectly executed to close out that game and punch his ticket to the Final Four. I do want to talk a little bit about Lucifron because I've kind of thought that I think it's pretty clear that the top 3 players are BC, Marine Lord, and Viper. I thought Lucifron really was kind of staking out a claim over the last few weeks for that 4th spot and even being able to challenge those top 3 because he's given Marine Lord some problems. I think he had a competitive series against BC a week or 2 ago, but man, it seems like he plays so well for like 95% of the game, and then he'll just have a huge mistake that just kills him, like those couple horsemen that killed like 25 villagers from this past weekend.
It's difficult to look at, right? Like, obviously, he's practicing a lot, and he's against elite competition, so sometimes it's difficult to judge someone by, hey, something went terribly wrong, but we often forget that these are against the best players in the world, right? Like, any moment, someone could have a misstep and everything just falls apart, right? Like, competition is pretty tough. And I think for Lucifron, he definitely had a step ahead during this tournament. So the fact that he has gotten into what is not just the top 8, but the top 6, actually, with the 3rd place in the group is pretty outstanding. I think it's actually his best finish in an S tier tournament so far. So he definitely had a step forward. He has improved his gameplay quite a lot. I really enjoyed the last couple of weeks of Lucifron's games. I think they were really enjoyable. He has played a very high level, brought in some new unique strategies. I remember him trying the 2 town center HRE build on Lipany that was very intriguing. So I think bright future is ahead of him as well. Obviously, competition right now is really tough. Like, out of nowhere, Vam and Puppy Paw just kicks the door to the top 8. Players that basically didn't get talked about at all before Golden League, right? And there is no guarantees that with Red Bull Volo coming in, we're not going to have 2 more people that just, once again, kick the door in and just kick some of the top 8 players a little lower, right? Competition is really steep. And we haven't even had Lidakor in the party. We haven't even had Mista in the party. And who knows how other players could step their game up. Like Kazva decided to focus full-time on AOE4. He could be a candidate to make it into the top 8, for example. So I feel like the storyline here simply is that the competition is so fierce, and essentially every single player in the top 8, probably even like top 12, have the ability to beat the others if the others have like one bad misstep or so.
Which you kind of just immediately led me to my next question. You kind of mentioned top 12. In my eyes, I would almost say 11. You got N4C. A lot of people would say B, obviously Wham and Puppy as well. And so Wololo is 16. I'm not going to make you name all 5, but give us two other names that you expect to be in the final 16. I heard you mention Caspa. Would that be one of your picks, or is there some other ones out there that you think might break through to the top?
I think Casva is going to have a really good shot. I'm not sure if he's going to make it. It also depends on, as I said, how much time he has to commit to this. But Casva is a reasonable candidate. It's a little difficult to tell because it comes down to a lot of things, right? Like the qualifiers are structured in a way that you gotta be relatively consistent. It's gonna be quite fierce as well. Like your competition is also going to be brutal because everybody knows how important that event is. So your competitors are also going to prepare proportionally more. So Casva is one of my candidates. B, Lidakor. Well, Lidakor was in M4C, so I guess he already counts that at top 11. But B is a candidate I can really see shining. I mean, he already had a pretty good run in Golden League. He's in top 10 in Golden League total points. Recon is one of my sneaky candidates. He has been around for a long time. I can see him being there. Running is a big one, I think. Running has improved considerably throughout Golden League, and like he almost made it into the top 8. Running finished top 13, and he actually had one of the best runs in the 3rd round, I believe. So Running is definitely a candidate. I can see some completely new names appearing even. So like we have been discussing this behind the scenes as well, and somewhat publicly, that Serral has been around playing 2v2s for a while. If he decides to go for 1v1, like, he's gonna have a real shot.
I did see he was laddering a little bit as well. It's been a
Yep.
couple weeks since he played, but I think he had a real quick skyrocket up into high diamond.
Yeah, so someone like, let's say, Taro, who was absent from the game for a long time, if he decides to come back to AOE4, commits time, Taro's got insane game knowledge of AOE2, and he's a great mind when it comes to designing new strategies. So, like, if Taro decides to go heavy on AOE4, I can see him making a top 16 because he's very creative, he's a great player. It's sort of difficult to assess this right now because the qualifiers will also be very long. But I feel like the last 5 spots have at least like 15, 20 people that have a realistic shot at it.
Do you see many AOE2 people coming over? Because, they obviously have their own Wololo tournament, that has a hefty prize pool as well. So I would think they would kind of stay with what they're comfortable with.
I think the people that have a legitimate shot at making the LAN event in AOE2 will go for that. Because, like, we have to understand that you can't really do both games at the same time at the elite level, like, unless you're Viper. But even then, Viper said that after Golden League, he's probably going to focus mostly on AOE2. So I can see, I think the people that could come over from AOE2 and try themselves at AOE4 to qualify are the people that have a very difficult time potentially challenging a spot for AOE2. So, for example, Kazuo was one of these people that couldn't really break into that very strict, like, let's say, top 10 of AOE2 and decided that, hey, this AOE4 could give me another shot. Maybe I'm slightly better at this game compared to the competition than I was in AOE2. And maybe he's going to get a spot at Red Bull Legacy in AOE4. So I think those people that have a realistic shot at qualifying in the AOE2 will go for that. Those people that don't consider themselves likely candidates in AOE2 to qualify for Red Bull Legacy, they could still try. I'm not sure about the prize pool distribution. I think it also depends on how much prize pool there is for the qualifiers and how much prize pool they can get for the qualifier events. Because for those of you that don't know, the way that it works in AOE2 is that we have a bunch of independent events that provide qualifying spots for Red Bull Volo. So it's like, just like Golden League provides 2 qualifying spots. N4C provides, I think, 1 or so. In AOE2, the way it works is that essentially, I think it's probably not all of the qualifying spots, but probably the majority of the qualifying spots are handed out on performance in these events. So I think it also depends on how likely the chances of that player are to secure prize money from those events as well. And of course, it could come down to game enjoyment as well. Like, some people flat out don't enjoy AOE4, and there is nothing wrong with that. If you don't enjoy AOE4, there is no one forcing you to play it. So if someone just enjoys playing AOE2, they might still decide to stay rather than potentially pursuing slightly better chances financially with the AOE4 event.
Yeah, I am curious to see if we get some more StarCraft 2 people, because if you're like the 30th ranked StarCraft 2 player, it's got to be tempting to look at the success that Beastie and the Muslim and Marine Lord have had, and even someone like Sort of, right? And like round 1, he made a deep run. I don't know how long he had been playing AOE for, but I think we might get some more people make the jump, which would be really cool.
Yeah, I said this before as a funny remark that AOE4 to a certain extent feels like a bit of an RTS retirement home. This is where the ex StarCraft pros, retired StarCraft pros come in, ex Warcraft pros come in, and they're just chilling over here. Obviously, right now with AOE4, there's still less pressure when it comes to like hardcore practice than StarCraft is. Like, StarCraft is so grindy, and you miss 2 days and you just fall like 50 spots on the ladder. So it's such a cutthroat competition. And AOE4 in that regard is a little more relieved. So many of the players that retired from those other titles come in here to play. But yeah, I can see players starting to transition from these other games, especially if it becomes financially more viable consistently, because consistency is probably the biggest part of this. If I pop out a $1 million event that lasts 7 days, that's not going to make StarCraft people come over because they're like, okay, event finishes, I get some money, and then what after, right? But if you show the entire esports world that, hey, we have consistent events coming in one after another with good price pools, like you see 125K for Golden League and then almost a 350 now for Red Bull combined, if you include the qualifiers as well. That could motivate players to come over because they see that, hey, even if I don't make this event, there is going to be a next one that I can make. And in that regard, I think the structure of Golden League is great, and the structure of the Red Bull, like pre-Red Bull events, the Road to Red Bull, is also great because it gives you consistently. Week after week, players have the chance to compete and get a share of a certain prize money. So that's, I think, helpful to attract new people in there.
Yep. All right. So previewing this weekend, do we know the order of the games?
No. Or at least I wasn't told.
Okay. Well, either way.
Do we have it announced? Like I may have missed it.
I haven't seen it.
I'm gonna be brutally honest. If it was announced, I either haven't seen it or just forgot it already. I don't know which is gonna come first. Honestly, I don't even think it matters because both of those are very high stakes sets. So it's like you could flip a coin. Could come down to personal preferences.
The only thing I did see that was had been leaked or announced or whatever it may be was Grubby is casting on Sunday, which he is actually one of the guys that got me into AOE4 and actually got me to kind of stick with the game, watching his streams and YouTube videos. So I'm always excited for that, and always get to see Logan as a guest appearance as well. So that'll be looking forward to that, and looking forward to catching some good games.
Yeah, Grubby is going to be part of the Sunday broadcast. That's correct.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
It's on Twitter now, 14 hours ago. I don't think it was publicly told that he's gonna be on Sunday.
Oh, whoopsies.
But I mean, if you got to know it, then it's probably a public info. It just wasn't in the Twitter post. We already have the entire lineup of the weekend set up. So
awesome.
All right, so we got. Let me look here. So we got Marine Lord and Viper. Who you got, Lidakor?
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know. I think this is one of those coin flip sets. It's like it's a real 50-50, and I feel like whoever wins is gonna win with like a 4-3 margin or so. My money is on Viper. He seemed so dominant, and yeah, he lost to Beastie, but I don't know, like every time I think about Viper, like Viper always delivers his best when he needs it the most. This is what I always say about him. And like in the set versus Beastie, he didn't need it that much, right? It's not like he's eliminated. It would be an awkward scenario because that would also mean that he qualifies for Red Bull World Legacy in AOE4 as well. And as we discussed before, he wants to focus on AOE2. He would probably play both. As far as I know, if he qualifies, he's going to focus on AOE2, but he's going to play in AOE4 as well in Legacy. I think, like, if I really had to make a prediction, although as I said, it's like a coin flip to me, it's like I'm going to say Viper with a 51% win chance over Marine Lord at 49. That's my assessment, but I might be totally wrong on that. Could come down to who has the better day there.
I'm gonna be the one on the opposite side. I think Marine Lord lately has just his game is just he has made it so tight and so clean, and you just against other people you see a lot of other people making just smaller errors, and I feel like there's less of them out of Marine Lord than some of the others. So I think that's really what's gonna allow him to take it over to the top.
Yep, I'm taking Marine Lord as well. Then all right, then the next set, BC Cutie versus Puppy Paw. Lidakor, who you got?
I feel like this is a little easier. I think Puppy is going to put up a good competition, so it's not going to be a sweep. But I just cannot see Beastie losing it. Beastie has been so consistent, and he's been so difficult to defeat. I think the deciding factor for me in a favor of Beastie is that Beastie is very difficult to defeat. Like, he has had some insane recoveries. He is really good in these comeback scenarios. If Puppy Paw plays a crystal clear game, I can see him surprising Beastie. But in a best of 7, it would be probably the biggest upset of the tournament if Puppy Paw was able to take down Beastie here. I can see Puppy Paw being competitive. I can see him pushing many games to the limits. But I think Beastie is going to have an edge in this one. So if I had to make a prediction, I'd probably go 4-2 Beastie.
All Puppy has to do is pick Deli first and get Beastie on a little tilt with some elephants, and it might go the other way. I know Wham almost started up 3-0 against him last week. Well, week before.
Yep.
Yeah, we are fans of Wham and Puppy Paw on this show, but
I got them both in my chat right now. They're Wham said he almost 4-0'd Beastie. So
all right. Well, Puppy, I'm sorry I got to do it to you. BC's he's on another level right now. I can't. It's just so hard to pick against him. I'm rooting for you, Puppy, though. I'm rooting for you.
I'm going to go on the upset train. Puppy said it's going to be easier for him. I agree. Easier matchup to pick. I'm going all Puppy. Here we go.
Well, he's not going to have the hotel Wi-Fi advantage this game, so. All right. And so then Sunday, obviously, we're going to have the third place match and then the grand finals. Is the third place a best of 7?
Nope, it's only going to be a best of 5.
Okay.
It would be a very long day because the grand finals is best of 9.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that will be one of the interesting things. Do they have to play all 8 civs if it goes to the best of 9?
I don't have the slightest clue. I have absolutely no idea. It's on my list of things to ask as we go closer and closer to that show. But yeah, I assume that the bigger question is, okay, you play 8 civs, and what's your criteria of selecting the 9th one? Are you forced to play the 8 civs first, and then you just can pick whatever you want for the 9th game? Or can you pick one civilization twice at any point in the set? I'm not even sure if there is a decision on that, so I'm going to have to look into that. But
I believe I don't know if it was this tournament. I want to say it was in another round where it was a similar structure where you could end up you had one repeat civ and you could use it in earlier rounds. I don't know exactly what the ruling was.
I think the finals of N4C was supposed to be best of 9. It didn't get there, but I would assume it's the same format what they used.
Even still, best of 9 is always exciting.
Yep. Well, I mean, kind of a good thing Wham didn't make it because he would have had to learn China.
I'm glad you called it out, not me.
No, I mean, you can just use it as a throwaway civ. Where your opponent picks his best civ, you just pop out China and say, okay, whatever, we're going to do just 5 archer ranges, full Chuka new spam, see what happens.
That would have been a perfect time for the Snoopa 200 villagers strat.
Or that.
Yep. All right, Lidakor, who takes it all home?
I feel like a lot could come down to who wins the Viper Marine Lord set, but the most confidence right now, I feel like when I just look at the games, obviously we can look at the score lines, but when I look at the games, I feel like right now, Beastie is probably the one that has the best chance in this one. As I said, the thing that impresses me with Beastie's play is how difficult he is to defeat. He's got insane recovery arcs. I remember he had a game, which was that game? That was maybe a Wham game where he played Mongols, and his opponent had to constantly attack him for 25 minutes in post-Imperial to finally knock him out of that game. Yeah, might have been Wham versus Beastie. And that just gives me, that is such an unbelievable skill to be able to hold even in the most dire situations. And the most difficult part of AOE4 on competitive level, I feel like, is closing out games. You can build an advantage relatively easily, but being able to close out games is sometimes very difficult, and it's very difficult to close out games against Beastie. And that makes him a candidate to win close games, and that could be a deciding factor in sets. So if I had to make a guess, as I said, I really don't want to go into massive predictions because I feel like this could go either way. But if I really had to make a guess or make a prediction, I would probably go with Beastie.
All right,
I remember
Dabs.
I mean, I don't know how Beastie's going to get to the finals with Puppy Paw beating him. So, I'm actually going to go with Marine Lord, though. I think Marine Lord finally, gets it and takes the cake here and shows his dominance here at the top.
Oh, stealing my pick. I think he ends the curse, right? BC kind of is the consensus like top late game player, right? But Marine Lord, he's no slouch either. I can remember 2 Lucifron French mirrors where he was just on the complete brink of destruction, ends up pulling it back, and he won that. What was it? 90-minute slugfest against BC Cutie. I think it was on Highview, like one of the rounds. I think it was round 1 of Golden League, right? So he's no slouch in the late game either. I think he ends the curse, and I think a Marine Lord BC Cutie final goes the whole distance. So you may want to borrow some Red Bull from Drongo.
Don't eat any spicy chicken or whatever it was.
Nah, that's not gonna be a thing. We're gonna be strict on diets.
That's right. I had one more thing to ask you. So the Red Bull, after Golden League concludes, you're going to start going into the Red Bull weekly series. I know Pesty has said he wants to give some new people some opportunities. So is that going to free up your schedule a little bit? Maybe hit the YouTube again?
Yes, probably it will. But part of the summer, I'm going to be away on holidays anyways. So like there's going to be some time that I miss. Yeah, like obviously I won't have a fully saturated schedule. Like right now in Golden League, I appear essentially once per week. That's gonna be way less scarce. So like, I would be surprised if it was more common than a bi-weekly appearance by me on Golden League. Will probably be mostly featured during the monthly finals rather than the individual weekly events. We haven't had deep talks about that lineup yet, but yes, it's probably going to free up more of my schedule. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of things in the background as well. So part of my schedule, as you could hear before, is just trying to improve in a more meaningful way. I haven't talked to Drongo about this one, but he's got the free for all event coming in, and I don't know, like there's a chance that I will cast some of those with him. We haven't really had talks about this one, but yes, I definitely want to go back. I have plans to go back on Twitch streaming as well, which is something I neglected for the last like 2 months or so. But like I had to understand that for a long time I went quality or quantity over quality. Like I streamed most of the events that were going on, sometimes like 15 hours a day, and I wasn't necessarily doing my best because I was so exhausted. I was just too distracted by all these things. And in the last 2 months, I started to focus more on making sure that when I appear under the best conditions I can appear in, and I deliver the best guest I can. So yes, I probably will go back to YouTube content once Golden League ends. In fact, I wanted to do, I actually wanted to do a lot of YouTube content during Golden League, but well, things simply didn't line up that way because the schedule was a little too busy for me. But yeah, I definitely want to do that. We'll probably once again focus on quality over quantity. So it's not like I'm going to pop out like I can't do the Drongo schedule of like popping out 2 videos every single day. It's like that's not for me. I don't have the stamina. I don't have the energy to do that. Especially because Drongo is full time. I'm actually doing a PhD alongside this one, so it's not like I am.
Wow.
I have a completely empty schedule, but yes, that's the plan. After
what's your PhD in? Well, what are you going for?
I'm doing chemistry, so
okay,
just the good old fashioned, fun, enjoyable stuff.
That's cool. Is there a entry list for, or the official list of participants for Drongo's tournament?
Oh,
I haven't seen one.
There is an official list, but I'm not sure if it's public yet.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, like I was mostly focusing on Golden League, so I'm yet to check out what Drongo is up to. I'm yet to check out what Red Bull is going to look like, or Road to Red Bull. So right now, all my eyes are set on this final weekend, and make sure that I do my best in the finals.
What's the casting schedule? You doing Saturday or Sunday or both?
I can probably share this one because like Basti already posted it out. It's not like we announced it much prior, but the plan is that we have Killer Pigeon and Nilly for both sets Sunday or a Saturday, and I'll be the one doing the observing. When I'm not casting, I usually do the obs because it's much more streamlined that way. And third place game is gonna be Grubby and KP again. And the grand finals is me and Drongo. That's the initial plan.
All right, very very excited for that. So yeah, Dabs, you got anything else before we conclude?
No,
here?
I feel like I bombarded my questions to Lidakor earlier on, so I got all those out of my system, and now I just have Nashi bombarding me.
Very very cool. So, Lidakor, thank you so much for hopping on with us. So any of you watching, if you're like me and Golden League, the broadcast concludes and you're like, oh man, I wish I could just listen to that just amazing Hungarian accent a little bit more. Check out his YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the description. He's going to be more active on it as soon as Golden League concludes, it sounds like. So you can have Lidakor on demand, as much Lidakor as you can handle. So
I have like 2 years worth of archived AOE2 content that are like my terrible casts, but I archived them on my YouTube. I can randomly pop any of those out. It's gonna be terrible because I was a complete potato at the time. But if you really want content, I mean, I can pop out, as I said, 2 years worth of AOE2 content with my potato casting.
That sounds fun. By the way, anytime you say "holy potatoes," it just it hits just right. Let me tell you.
Well, you gotta have your signature phrases, right?
All right, cool. Well, thanks again for hopping on, and I think we'll be back next week. So
yeah, sounds like a plan.
All right.
Thanks to everyone for showing on out.
Yeah, we'll see y'all later.
All right, thank you guys.